Professor Hemanta Sharma join kora nahi.
Ajizda, may we start?
Yes.
Ajizda. Hello. Hello. Ajizda. May we start now?
Yes.
Hello, Ajizda. Okay.
Yes, we may
Okay.
start.
So, okay. Good afternoon to everyone. On behalf of the Department of Mathematics, Gauhati University, India, I am Dr. Santanu Acharjee, Assistant Professor, Department of Mathematics, Gauhati University, welcoming our Honorable Vice Chancellors of Gauhati University, Professor Pratapjyoti Hendrik Sir, Honorable Invited Speaker, Professor Robin Dunbar Sir, Emeritus Professor, Department of Evolutionary Psychology, University of Oxford, United Kingdom, respected participants, distinguished guests, my dear colleagues, to this international webinar on mathematical scopes in evolutionary neuroscience. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you into this auspicious moment in the history of Department of Mathematics, Gauhati University, when we are going to find the mathematical scopes into evolutionary neuroscience from the talk of Professor Robin Dunbar, who does not require any formal introduction, as his name is associated with us through his famous contribution Dunbar's number. History of mathematics has been encouraging us for interdisciplinary research work for long. But from the perspective of Indian mathematical research scenario, it is easy to tell that hardly any mathematics department of any Indian institute has research scopes in evolutionary neuroscience from the perspective of mathematics. If we look at the medieval era of last millennium, then we can find that mathematician René Descartes studied the human visualization and mind-body synchronization almost 500 years ago. Mathematician Hermann von Helmholtz's contribution to mathematics of eye, theories of vision, the visual perception of space, color vision research, etc. are known to every medical students from the perspective of ophthalmology. Similarly, recent developments of neuroscience with grid cell, place cell, optogenetics, etc. are carrying a huge amount of theory and experiments from the perspective of biology. But as we know that a mathematical explanation is always expected from the progress of any scientific discovery. As we know that when it rains, sailing of umbrellas rises. That is, attributes always play crucial roles, either knowingly or unknowingly, in any kind of human behavior. Then there is a cognition. Evolutionary neuroscience and evolutionary psychology plays crucial roles. For example, how does a child learn his mother language very easily in comparison to other languages? These types of studies need evolutionary neuroscience, evolutionary psychology, human intelligence, etc. Similarly, our social behavior needs all of these. Where social behaviors of animals are concerned, Professor Robin Dunbar and his pioneering idea, Dunbar's number, is present in evolutionary neuroscience, evolutionary psychology. Most of all, artificial intelligence has been finding suitable roles of Dunbar's number to develop various latest softwares with artificial intelligence. Evolution of online social networks networking sites which Facebook, Twitter, etc. are unable to change Professor Dunbar's contribution on evolutionary neuroscience. Thus, on this auspicious day, we will look forward to establish the possible connection of evolutionary neuroscience with mathematics from the perspective of pioneering Dunbar's number. Mostly in this COVID-19 pandemic, we are almost aware about the word social distancing. I'm glad to share with all of you that British Broadcasting Corporation, in short BBC, seeked advice of Professor Dunbar in this pandemic strategy making from the perspective of human cognition. After all, we are all humans and we are all social animals. Thus, this lockdown period, social distancing, etc., surely have large impact on human cognition from the perspective of Dunbar's research work. With this, I am welcoming all of you again into this auspicious program. Now, I would like to request our Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir, Professor Pratap Jyoti Hendik Sir, to inaugurate the international webinar on mathematical scopes in evolutionary neuroscience and to deliver his inaugural speech. I'm requesting, sir. Sir.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you,
sir.
Dr. Acharjee.
Thank you, sir.
Dear Professor Rudrakant Deka, Head of the Department Mathematics, and our invited speaker, Professor Robin I. M. Dunbar, faculty members of mathematics, and all the participants. It's really my pleasure to be here to inaugurate the international webinar on mathematical scopes in evolutionary neuroscience. I welcome you all. The topic of the webinar is very important, and particularly being a student of biology and specifically molecular genetics, I understand evolutionary neuroscience, at least in basic level, though not much. And I know that the use of mathematics in biology is gaining importance as it shows both theoretical and physical exertion. Mathematical neuroscience, it is also known as, I may not be wrong probably, the computational neuroscience has been growing as a branch of neuroscience. Mathematical neuroscience utilizes mathematical models, hypothetical analysis, and concept of the brain to understand the principles that administer the development, structure, physiology, and cognitive capacity of the nervous systems. So these are very common definitions available. I hope the people will understand this definition. The scientific study of the evolution of nervous system is basically termed as evolutionary neuroscience. It is a really mature science. Due to incredible development of molecular biology techniques in recent times and the tools of computational biology, the investigation on structure, functions, and electronic embryonic characteristics of the nervous systems are being coming up, both in historical and evolutionary perspective. A lot of literatures are available on evolutionary neuroscience, though not enough or huge. But one book that I just want to mention some of the sentences from this book, Evolutionary Neuroscience, audited by Professor John H. Cass of Vanderbilt University, which was published by Academic Press 2009. The book highlighted that the evolutionary neuroscience scientists examine changes in genes, anatomy, physiology, and behavior to study the evolution of changes in the brain. Neurological study comprises a large number of processes, including the evolution of vocal, visual, auditory, taste, and learning systems, as well as language evolution and development. In addition, evolutionary neuroscientists study the evolution of the specific areas or structures in the brain, such as the amygdala, which is the collection of cells near the base of the brain, that is called amygdala, then forebrain and cerebellum, as well as the motor or visual cortex. the two scientists, the George F. Schrader and John L. Rubinstein, have very specific comments in the introductory part of this particular book I mentioned, Evolutionary Neuroscience. They commented that the evolutionary neuroscientists have existed since Darwin days, and they are unlikely to go extinct. It means it is a very mature and old science, but a lot of development is coming up, and there will be a lot of contribution also in future days. As long as neurological research is performed on a diversity of species, there will be those who seek to synthesize the disparate data, and for the synthesis, the theory of evolution is indispensable. Still, a full evolutionary synthesis in neuroscience is just beginning to take shape. No previous publications surveyed the full spectrum of the work in evolutionary neuroscience, ranging as it does from genes to behavior, and from minute invertebrates to whale and big animals like whales, elephant, and also very intelligent human beings. So I feel that mathematics has a great role, already it played a great role, and also in future it has a great role to play in more understanding of the evolutionary neuroscience. I do hope, because today we invited a very specific worker on mathematical neuroscience, evolutionary neuroscience, Professor Dunbar. I hope he will learn detailed and structured informations and concept about the scope of mathematics in evolutionary neuroscience from our invited speaker. I appreciate the head of the department, the faculty members of the mathematics, and also the young convener who took all the effort to organize this international webinar on a very important topic. With these very few words, I am pleased to declare that the international webinar on mathematical scopes in evolutionary neuroscience is inaugurated this afternoon, the 8th August 2020. I wish the seminar a great success. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable words, encouraging words, which will surely make this event successful. Thank you, sir. Now, I would like to request Professor Rudrakanto Deka, sir, Head of the Department of Mathematics, Gauhati University, to say a few words to our participants on behalf of our department. Sir, please.
Good afternoon to everybody. First, I thank our PC sir, Professor Patajyoti Hendrik sir, for inaugurating this program. Also, I congratulate our convener for organizing this program. I welcome all participants to this platform. On behalf of my department, welcome all. Our department is the oldest department and of the oldest university of our state, established in 1948. Our university is located in the Brahmaputra Valley, the famous river, the fifth topmost river in the world, the most turbulent river. And this river is most turbulent because this river carries tidal wave, and the tidal wave moves against the direction of the flow. That is why this is famous in the world and declared as the fifth rough turbulent river in the world. Our department has 16 faculty members from both and pure applied mathematics stream, with having different research thrust areas. As all of us know that friendship is the single most important factor influencing our health, well-being, and happiness. Creating and maintaining friendship is, however, extremely costly. This was established in the paper Anatomy of Friendship published in 2018 by Professor Dunbar, sir. So our speaker is actually a great personality. He is more than a mathematician. and scientist. He's a friend of human race as well as animal race. He has studied different characters of human, like these human values, human characteristics, like social laughter, music. He has studied the dominance of characters amongst baboons, dolphins, etc. Also, he has studied the different characteristics of tall men in comparison to short men. Also, he has studied the evolution of social breed. So in total, I am very happy that we are having such a great personality, a great friend, and I hope all the participants will become friends to him and maintain a very good relationship with him. And this is also our duty to maintain good relationship with Professor Dunbar sir. And definitely our relationship will based on this academic investment, because this maintaining friendship is very costly. Thank you. Welcome again to all participants. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words. And now I would like to introduce Professor Dunbar to all of our participants. Although Professor Dunbar does not need any kind of introduction, because already I mentioned that his pioneering ideas, Dunbar's number, is itself his introduction. Yet it is our pleasure to, and it is our also prestige to introduce him to all our participants. Professor Dunbar is an Emeritus Professor of Evolutionary Psychology, University of Oxford, United Kingdom. He is Fellow of Magdalen College of University of Oxford. He is Fellow of Royal Anthropological Institute's British Academy, Association of Psychological Science, USA, Galton Institute, International Brain and Evolutionary Society. Professor Dunbar completed BA from Oxford University in 1969. He did his PhD from Bristol University in 1973. MA from Oxford University in 2007. Professor Dunbar was postdoctoral research associate in Bristol University. Among various awards, Professor Dunbar was awarded by honorary visiting professorship in University College London, Kyoto University of Japan, Edinburgh University, Uppsala University of Sweden, University of Kent, etc., along with several others. He is editorial board members of several of his research areas journal. Some of them are Proceedings of Royal Society London, Human Nature, Biology Letters, Journal of Evolutionary Psychology, etc. He has published more than 10 books and edited several books in his research topics. Professor Dunbar published more than 200 research papers in various reputed journals, which include Proceedings of National Academy of Science, USA, Science, Scientific Reports, Proceedings of Royal Society London, SAIL, Journal of Neuroscience, Trends in Cognitive Science, Frontiers in Psychology, Cognition, PLOS ONE, and many others. In 2015, Professor Dunbar was honored by Huxley Medal by Royal Anthropological Institute of Great Britain and Ireland. Huxley Medal is one of the very prestigious medal of research areas, and it is very oldest award. Now, I would like to request Professor Dunbar to deliver his invited talk. And before it, I want to mention one particular thing which Professor Dunbar insisted me to mention. Professor Dunbar has a very long connection with India. His father was born and brought up in India. Even his grandfather was in India and died in Dehradun. So Professor Dunbar is basically, we can say that he is attached with India since long. So now I'm requesting Professor Dunbar to deliver his invited talk. Professor Dunbar, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for those kind introductions. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me all right, and that the mysteries of the internet don't let us down on this occasion. I'm going to talk mainly about my areas of research. So it's not so mathematical in that sense. I'm not a mathematician by background. Any difficult mathematical questions, I hope you'll direct them to Dr. Acharjee rather than to me, because he knows about these things. Most of my areas that I work in that are related to mathematics is really statistical physics, I suppose. Though again, I'm not a physicist. I collaborate with a lot of statistical physicists. I suppose for mathematicians, statistical physics is a very applied and subordinate area compared with the queen of the sciences that mathematics famously is. So what I'm going to try and give you some sense of is the complicated interconnections between the different fields of biology and psychology and mathematics that we've worked with to build up the general picture we have of human sociality as it now is. So I'll now try and get my slides to open up if we can. What's going on? No, this is not, I'm sharing you, I think. Just a minute. Let me try again. Okay. With a bit of luck, we might. No, sorry, I'm trying to get my slides up and go back and try again. Yeah, I'm stuck in my screen here is the problem. I can't get my.
Hello, Professor Dunbar.
Okay.
Hello, Professor Dunbar. Yeah, there is a three dot in that corner, top corner.
Yeah.
And once you will click, there is a screen sharing option.
Yeah, I have that already, but it's just I think I'm on full screen and I can't get it out. Okay, hang on a minute. That's better. This may work now. Right, that's what we want. Right.
Yes, sir. It is visible now.
It's visible now. Okay, good, excellent. Right, we're away.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let me just begin with a little evidence of how important friendships are for us. We're very social species, as we all know, and we're intensely social because we're a member of the primate family of animals generally, and the primates are the most social species of all the animals. So I'll just show you a little bit of data first on how important your friendships actually are for you. So these are data published by my good friend Nick Christakis, who's at Yale University in the United States, some years ago, based on a large-scale epidemiological study of essentially looking at heart attacks in a population. They studied an entire community of several thousand people in an entire village, and have been following them through for about 30 years now, I think. And what, although the original study was concerned with medicine and with diseases and particularly with heart attacks, so it's known as the Framingham heart study, Christakis and his former graduate student, Fowler, became interested in the patterns of association that occurred within the community, the friendships that occurred within the community. And among the many things they showed was that if you plot on a friendship structure of the community, so each of these dots is one person and they are joined to people they nominate as a friend, and you can see the whole community is quite well integrated with close friendships and more distant friendships. And they overlain on that, in this particular case, people who declared themselves to be happy, contented, and people who declared themselves to be unhappy. And the unhappy people are the yellow dots, the happy people are the blue dots, and the green dots are kind of sitting in the middle, in between, neither happy nor unhappy. And the main lesson from this is that there is an enormous amount of assortivity in these data. The yellow dots cluster together, the blue dots cluster together, and even the green dots seem to cluster together. And they showed that this pattern was common for a whole range of things. And this included whether or not you became obese in the future, whether you gave up smoking, whether you became depressed or became no longer depressed, all depended on the state of in particular your immediate friend, but they could pick up a signal even from friends of friends of friends, affecting your medical and your psychological state. And it even included affecting your risk of mortality. So if a close friend died, you're much more likely to die yourself within the next year. So there's something about living in these social communities which dramatically affects our risk of disease and illness and even mortality in the end. And speaking of mortality, this is one of my favorite studies in many ways, showing the importance of friendship here. So this is an epidemiological study, or it's a meta-analysis actually of about 150 epidemiological studies of why people died. It's a very large sample, about 300,000 people involved altogether between these various studies. And they were interested in what best predicts your mortality within the following 12 months. And though this doesn't apply to all disease conditions, for people who died of heart attacks in particular, the factors that most strongly predicted your risk of mortality was your network quality, the number and quality of friendships that you had. Second only was to that was giving up smoking, and anything else, and all the things that the doctors worry about, how much exercise you take, how much alcohol you drink, your BMI, your body mass index, how obese you are, what drugs you're on, even the atmosphere in the town where you live, have very much smaller effects. So the short answer is friendships really are extremely important to us, not just for their social benefits, but also for their medical benefits, for our health and our well-being and indeed our survival. So I'm just really trying to establish the importance of this. So you might ask the question then, if friendships are so important to us, should we not try and have an infinite number of friends, that we would survive much longer if we had a very large number of friends than we have if we only have a small number of friends? And this raises, of course, the question of, is there a limit? Is there a natural limit on the number of friends you can have? Now, to establish this, let me take a step back to primates in general, the monkeys and apes, and show you what's known as the social brain hypothesis. And the social brain hypothesis is an explanation for why monkeys and apes have much bigger brains than other species of animals and birds, why they appear to be much more cognitively sophisticated, much more intelligent than other species. And the suggestion was made some years ago that this was because they lived in very complex social systems. In fact, they live in bonded social groups where they have what really are very close friendships. So the kind of core evidence for this really was this graph, which I plotted probably about 25 years ago now, which plots group size as a very crude measure of social complexity against the size, a measure of the size of the brain. The measure I'm using here is the neocortex ratio, which is the ratio of the neocortex to the rest of the brain, simply because the neocortex is the bit of the brain that's expanded out of all proportion during the course of primate evolution. It's basically a very large, thin sheet in the human, about 1 meter square in area, but only a few millimeters deep. And that gets wrapped around the inner core of the brain. But it's a reflection of the fact that, well, I guess it's important to say this is where all the clever stuff goes on, all the clever thinking that we do goes on in the neocortex. And the rest of the brain is about maintaining the body and keeping the body alive, if you like. So if you plot group size, the average group size for species of primates against the size of the neocortex, the relative size of the neocortex, you get a distribution that looks like this. It turns out that it actually consists of 3 separate grades. On the left-hand side of what I call the stupid monkeys, there are a lot of prosimians in there, but also some monkeys, old and new world monkeys. You've got next to them in the black symbols, the kind of reasonably smart monkeys, a lot of old world and new world monkeys in here, some prosimians. Then you have the very smart monkeys, and finally on the right-hand side, the black symbol, the squares on the right-hand side, you have the apes. So the bottom symbol is the gibbons, the 2 middle ones, the gorilla and chimpanzee, and the orangutan also fits in there very close to those two. Sorry, I beg your pardon, this is gorilla and orangutan. I'm misreading it. The top symbol is the chimpanzee, which lives in much bigger groups. Now, given that we have this relationship, we should be able to plug in human neocortex ratio and read off the size of groups that humans should have. There's an object lesson here, because statisticians always tell you never to extrapolate data beyond the range or extrapolate relationships beyond the range of data you have. And the irony is, of course, if I'd listened to the statisticians, we wouldn't have discovered this really important relationship, which if you plug humans into this relationship gives you a group size of about 150, which is now known as Dunbar's number. Okay, so the question is, are human groups really so small as this? After all, we live in massive cities these days with maybe tens of millions of people in them. Here is some data based on telephone calling patterns. So these are actually the data from one mobile phone provider in one European country. It represents about 20% of the entire country. We've removed all the business numbers and the like from this, and just looked at personal subscribers, and it's the total calling patterns over the course of about a year. Now you can see the x-axis here is the number of people that are called in the course of a year, and you can see that some people don't call many people at all. Some people call people a lot, but there is a very striking peak, and it's a normally distributed peak as well, with an average at about 150 almost exactly. And we can now sort of show large numbers of different kinds of data of this sort of kind, showing exactly this effect. It always comes out to about 150. There's historical data that bears this out. So this is data on the size of essentially villages in the Italian Alps. Over a 500-600 year period, so it starts in about 1200. Sorry, the numbers have slipped a bit on the x-axis there, and runs through to about 1800. And you can see that average village size, and the dots are the actual sizes of villages at given points, given dates. The average village size is very consistently stable at around about 175 thereabouts. The median village size is rather better still. It's 140. It's very close, much closer to the 150. But this is in the context where the size of the population as a whole was increasing dramatically across time. So that's indicated by the blue line. That's not to scale. I should add, but the population increased about tenfold in this particular area, but village size remained very, very consistent. And of course, what was happening is as the size of villages grew, they were being partitioned and splitting up, and part of the village would go and start a new village somewhere else. So there's lots of historical data. We can point to other historical data which also suggest village size in the UK, for example, was almost exactly 150 over this same long time span, didn't really change. And the question you might ask is, well, has the internet, and in particular social media, changed our social world in the way that I guess both email when it started and social media promised it would, that it would increase the number of friends you could have all around the world? Has the internet managed to allow us to break through the constraints of Dunbar's number? And the answer seems to be no. These are data collected by essentially Facebook. There are 1 million Facebook pages here. The number of friends listed on the Facebook page. And you can see it's a very, very skewed distribution. So the limit here goes out to 5,000, which is the maximum Facebook, at least at the time, would allow you to have on your Facebook page. And you can see, yes, there's a tiny little blip of yellow out there. Most of those are probably professional users in some form, or companies using Facebook for their products. But the majority of people had between 150 and 250 people on their listed on their Facebook page. 250 is actually the upper limit. The 95% confidence intervals around the prediction of 150 from the primate relationship, the social brain relationship. The 95% confidence intervals are actually 100 to 250. So you can see that Facebook users are in the upper half of that, but they're still well within the range. There are a few people that have, let's say, 1,000 friends on Facebook, but probabilistically, it's a very small proportion. It's just that given however many billion people are now on Facebook, or any other social media, I guess, given the large numbers involved, a very small proportion multiplied by a very large number is still a sizable number, so that it's possible for everybody to know somebody who has 1,000 friends on Facebook. But most of us don't. We have we keep our friends on Facebook down to about the same size as our everyday face-to-face social network. Indeed, most of people's friends on Facebook are the people they know in everyday life. And some more data effectively showing that. It's just one of our studies. Both the size of the core social network, not the whole social network, but the inner core social network, for passive and active Facebook users. And you can see there's no statistical difference here. And also on the right-hand side graph, there's the level of expressed emotional closeness to these inner core friends doesn't differ between active and passive users. So essentially this is reflecting their offline world just being replicated online. And we know from a lot of imaging studies, probably one of the most exciting parts of applied physics in the last few decades, really, allowing us to look inside the brain. We've done about half a dozen of these studies, and other people have done them. In addition, looking at how the size of bits of the brain correlate with the number of friends people have. And people have used all sorts of different measures of friendship. Some people have looked at the inner core of best friends that you have, just ask people to list out how many close friends they have. They've looked at the total network size, offline network size. Some people have used the number of friends on Facebook as an easy measure. All of them agree that this area in the front of the brain here in green and blue correlates in particular with the number of, and very strongly with the number of friends you have in all these studies. This area is associated with the emotional, the interpretation of emotional cues, the meaning of emotional cues. It's also involved heavily in your ability to understand how other people think, understand other people's minds. So it's part of what's known as the theory of mind network, neural network, or sometimes as the default mode neural network. And this involves this particular bit at the front of the brain, just above the eyes, but also the bit along the this lobe here, the temporal lobe, so along the top of the temporal lobe in particular, and the area just behind it. So there's a sort of loop of certain neural circuitry here linking these three areas. This area is predominantly memory. This is recognizing biological activity, if you like, that this is a biological person in particular. Lots of those kind of processing areas are in there. But that linkage between these three areas forms the default mode network and is heavily implicated in our ability to understand how other people think and how they behave and so on, to predict how they behave. And then that's an important component tucked up in there underneath here, which was mentioned earlier in the introductions, is the amygdala and the other areas of the limbic system that handle emotional cues. So between the default mode network and the limbic system, that's really what's managing our social relationships. And you can see these patterns here in finer detail, in much finer detail imaging. So here's the orbital frontal cortex again down here, and you can see here the temporal lobe and the parietal lobe junction up here, and down under there, the limbic system. And we now know that this is also true for at least two species of monkeys. One, the rhesus macaque from India, and the other is the African baboon. So this is a general primate effect. The more friends you have, the bigger this area is. We're not quite sure. Well, we know that actually the causal sequence goes from the size of this brain to the number of friends you have, at least in adults, but we don't know how this develops so well in children yet. Okay, so here we are. You live in a social world which consists primarily of about 150 people with whom you have meaningful relationships. Now, the thing is that your social world doesn't look like this. It doesn't look like a kind of honeybees on a hive, a beehive kind of phenomenon. It looks much more like this on the bottom right. It's your relationships are much more clumpy than that. And this is resulted in a number of studies which have tried to pick apart the structure of this social world we live in, this 150 people. So these two graphs on the bottom left here are from studies we did in collaboration with some colleagues in China, and the top right version is another study by some Americans with a different data set. What these two bottom studies have done is to use spectral analysis to look at the fractal structure of how the distribution of grouping sizes looks in different human groupings. So on the left here is a variety of groupings from small-scale societies, particularly in the context of hunter-gatherers, for example, the living group, and then the wider community the living group is related to, and the tribe size, and so on. And on the bottom right is analysis that was done of our data on Christmas card distributions. So this is looking at essentially emotional closeness that people rated to the people they sent Christmas cards to at Christmas. And the key thing here is these big peaks. They identify the fractal structure, the fractal parameter, and you convert the fractal parameter back into what it means in terms of the scaling ratio. It gives you a scaling ratio of about 3. These guys over here in America looked at the hunter-gatherer data set, the different grouping sizes, hunter-gatherer data set. They used a Horton order analysis because they thought they knew what the grouping levels actually were. And the regression line through there gives you the slope, and it turns out to be almost exactly the same as this, about 3.3. So what this essentially, let me show you our analyses of phone call data. This is the same European cell phone data set. First of all, if you do this was done using Jenks, the Jenks algorithm for identifying natural breaks. If you do that on the data set down here on the left, shows the optimal number of clusters you get. It's either 4 or 5 come out as top. When you then apply the Jenks distribution and decompose, if you like, the single distribution into its subcomponents, the pattern you get is what's shown there. This is the pattern for 4. But it turns out that this distribution of, if you like, subsets within here, the modal values of each of those subgraphs comes out very, very close to what we've obtained both from Facebook data. This was done with some physicists I collaborate with in Italy, and some Twitter data where they scraped conversations within a Twitter account. So these are the Twitter followers talking to each other, if you like, within somebody's account, and you can see the layer sizes, the mean layer sizes that come out of both Facebook. We're missing the very large data set. The reason there's no large value on the Facebook data set, this is a very early Facebook data set. It's a publicly available one from 2009. So was quite soon after Facebook started. So people were still dealing mainly with their closer friends. And you can see the consistency in the pattern of these layers. And at the bottom, the face-to-face layer is the patterns we get from, or the average values we get for these layers from our face-to-face data on people's actual real world, if you like, social networks. So that's based primarily on the frequencies of contact. And again, here are the hunter-gatherer data just to show you what that looks like. Running out beyond the 150. So these are the overnight camps that you get in, the size of overnight camps that you get. Several of these camps will be embedded into a community, sometimes known as a clan, and then these in turn are embedded into a megaband, and several megabands are embedded into a tribe. So a tribe is this, all the people that speak the same language, or in a big language group, the same dialect, and that's a linguistically defined term, as it were. It's a linguistic term, but the average size of these is almost exactly 1,500. And these are fractal patterns. So you can see the multiples of 3 going through. So not only do you have the structure with layered annually in the social networks of people, but this layering continues far beyond that, at least. We in fact know there's an outer layer beyond the 1500 now that's turns out to be at 5,000, which is rather extraordinary. It's actually quite interesting just to observe that, well, I suppose going back to this point here, this layer here, what we refer to as the 5 layer is also what I call the friends to cry on, shoulders to cry on friends. They're the people you have very close emotional relationships with. They will usually consist of some family members, close family members, and perhaps 1 or 2 best friends. Aristotle, the great Greek philosopher, from nearly 3,000 years ago, identified this. He said that the number of true friends you have, you can count on the fingers of one hand. And his teacher, Plato, said that the maximum size for a democracy is 5,000 people, which is the next layer, it turns out here, and that it's defined by the number of faces we can identify as familiar, as it were. And after that, everybody looks the same. We get exactly the same layers in online games. So this is an Austrian massive online game known as Pardus. I'm sure where the origin of that comes from. It has about 500,000 players. And when my collaborator in Austria analyzed the frequencies of alliance formation that went on within the game, they got numbers which were really very similar in size to what we find in social relationships. So this is you here, you're a member of a clique of about 4, which hangs together a lot. A slightly bigger group of about 12, which are essentially 3 cliques, who regularly form alliances, and then a larger group of alliance partners that come and go. So these are very unstable. They don't last very long on the whole, these alliances, unlike our friendships, which tend to last rather longer. And here you can see the full set that they obtain. So again, you can see the numbers are reasonably close to what we have for online game. We think there's 1 layer missing in there from that they weren't aware of, and it would make a perfect sequence if that was there and the case. So this is what your social world looks like. It's essentially a embedded multi-layer fractal hierarchy. You sit in the center here, and you have, it turns out, we only discovered this when we looked at the Facebook and Twitter data, this inner layer of about 1.5 very intimate friends who are part of a circle of 5 best friends, if you like. So these layers are inclusive. The 1.5 is included in the 5 here, and that's part of a group of 15. It goes out here. The red line demarcates your 150. That demarcates the number of people whom you will willingly help out and be altruistic towards. And beyond that, then we have a group of about 500, which is really what we'd think of as acquaintances, people we know well, but we perhaps wouldn't invite home to our house for some big party or other. 1,500 is somewhat equivalent to the number of faces we can put names to, so we know who these people are. It's just that they're not particular friends. And as I say, there's an outer layer about 5,000 where we can differentiate between people we recognize, we've seen them before, and people we are complete strangers to us. So the question then is why we get these layers rather than having, just sort of 150 all equal friends, why we differentiate between friendships of different quality. And herein time becomes really important. So here are our layers. Whoops. What we want is this little graph on top of it. This demonstrates really how the layers are built up, that it's a consequence of how much we invest It's important because the
I'm requesting all the participants to wait for a few seconds. Probably there is a network issue from the side of Professor Dunbar. So please be patient. Thank you. Hello, Professor Dunbar. Can you hear me? Hello, Professor Dunbar. Hello, Professor Dunbar. Can you hear me? Hello, Professor Dunbar. Hello. I'm requesting all the participants to wait for a few seconds. There is a technical problem from the side of Professor Dunbar. There is a network issue, so that he can't make a communication with us. I'm requesting all of you to please wait for a few seconds. Thank you.
I think please try to contact him through the some message or email.
Yes, sir. We are trying our best to communicate with Professor Dunbar. Probably there is a network issue, so I'm trying.
Okay, thanks.
requesting all of you to be patient. We have a problem from the side of Professor Dunbar because we could not make communication to Professor Dunbar because of the network issue. So please wait for 3-4 minutes. So, and we are trying to fix the problem that is occurred with him. That for the technical problems, so all of you are to wait. We are trying to connect with Professor Dunbar. So in the meanwhile, when we are trying to connect with Professor Dunbar, so I am requesting our faculty member, Professor Tarni Kumar Dutta sir, to just have some discussion on the talk of Professor Dunbar to our participants, so that in the meanwhile we will try to connect with Professor Dunbar. So I'm requesting Professor Tarni Kumar Dutta sir to have some discussion on Professor Dunbar's talk. In the meanwhile, we are trying to connect with Professor Dunbar. Please, sir.
Thank you very much. Actually, I don't have so much knowledge about the neurosurgeon or the structures of the brain and so on here. But I have one question in my mind. Then even today also, Einstein is recognized as the greatest scientist in the world. And on the structures of the brain of the Albert Einstein, lot of research work are going on in different universities of the world. And therefore, actually, I am interested in asking Professor Dunbar, what kind of
network phone network connection maybe sir
no, my idea is that is anybody knows, is there any significant outcome of the research on the brain of Albert Einstein till today? And there may be some lot of outcome also that Einstein brain is something different from the normal human being. What kind of different scientists have developed or scientists have found up till now? And these are the very interesting, I think, topic nowadays, very interesting topic. And now what I am thinking that in our mathematics department of Gauhati University, we are studying the chaos theory and how to control the chaos. And therefore in our practical field also there are a lot of chaos. This is also one kind of chaos. And therefore by applying the mathematical theory, can you come out of the problem? Can you have a suitable solution of the problem? What kind of mathematics we can use? I think that is another thing. Is there any mathematical modeling problems through which we can have a very suitable solutions on this problem? I think these are the reality. And with the research work also, should try to work out this type of problem, how we can get it out. But anyway, what I feel that the topic is really very excellent. And Professor Dunbar also, he is presenting in a very decent way, and so that we all the participants mostly are getting interest. But suddenly there is a technical talk that is very unfortunate. It might happen. It is not that is a new problem for us. And this type of problems, I think, always happens. Even in our colleges, they organize lot of webinar, and because of the technical reason, most of the time they have to cancel the webinar also. And that is the, I think, natural scenario all over the world. Now, may I also request our Dr. Say Arun Mohanto to speak something about the application of fractal geometry in this problem. Do you have any idea how the fractal geometry can be used to solve this type of problems?
Sir, actually, I don't know this type of technical problem. How can we handle this? But within the domain of fractal geometry, there is some solutions, because the father of fractal geometry is Benoit Mandelbrot. He is starting the study of fractal from such a problem. But my study is not so deep to analyze such type of problem.
Yes, I think that is very important. But as far as the chaos, if you go to the origin of the development of the chaos theory in physics, then what we know that 100 years ago, there was a very simple problem, whether the solar system is stable or not. And in order to discuss the solution of this problem, mathematicians have developed two branches of the mathematics. One branch is the chaos theory, and another branch is the algebraic topology. And therefore, algebraic topology and chaos theory are the two sides of the coin. And after several years of study, the scientists have said that, many scientists have said that the solar system is not stable. That means, for example, the Earth suppose orbit, it is not a stable, it is not a elliptic. The Earth is approaching towards the Sun, of course, very slowly. And scientists also predicted that after suppose 1,000 years, the Earth may collapse because of the strong heat of the Sun. And this way, I think the chaos theory has been developed from the origins. But I think there are a lot of interesting story of interesting developed the chaos theory in physics. I think some participants from the physics also are there. I think what they know about the chaos theory in physics, we want to hear something from the physics people.
Sir, I want to say that our BCK sir is here, sir. So BCK sir probably can be.
Yes.
BCK sir is here, sir.
So I'm requesting Professor BCK sir, ex-professor and Professor Emeritus of Gauhati University, to share a few words on the possible applications of mathematics on Professor Dunbar's work. And we are very much sorry to inform you that we are still trying to connect with him. Probably due to the network issue, we could not connect with Professor Dunbar. So I'm just requesting all the participants to kindly cooperate with us, because this problem is, although uncertain, yet we can expect that that there is a need of solution of this types of problem in online webinar. So I'm requesting all the participants to cooperate with us, and we are still trying to connect with Professor Dunbar. And in this regard, I must share some experience to all of you participants, because I recently worked with Professor Dunbar in one paper. So I must share some continuation of Professor Dunbar's work. So Professor Dunbar mentioned his work with the Facebook, and recently it is found that when the Facebook data were taken, so from the perspective of the Facebook data, it was found that people also behave the same as they behave in offline mode. So that means 150 is the Dunbar's number, and due to the neurocortex size of our brain, we can't make more friends than 150. Yes, suppose imagine you are just organizing your marriage party, and you can invite more than 150, so to more 150 people. But if I will ask you, so whether you know everyone equally, so then definitely it will be reduced. So that was the hierarchy layer which Professor Dunbar showed, that is 1.55, then 15, then 50, and 150, then 500, and then 15, 1,500, and last one is the 5,000. Okay. So the idea of the Professor Dunbar is basically depends on the neurocortex side. And recently what is going on, that even he told that in case of baboon and also some kind of dolphins, they are also following the Dunbar structure. But the question is that Twitter found that Dunbar's number is unchangeable. Even Facebook found Dunbar's number is unchangeable. So recently I had a communication with Professor Dunbar a few days ago. So where I asked a question that can the Dunbar's number be the reason so that people uses WhatsApp more in comparison to the Facebook in immediate communication? So Professor Dunbar discussed with me that it may be the reason, because still WhatsApp does not give any kind of data to other people till now. So maybe due to the lack of data, so this can be not possible. But about from the perspective of social networking sites, so I must want to tell that social networking sites has two perspectives. One is from the Milgram's perspective, and another one is the Dunbar's perspective. So what is Milgram's perspective? Probably if Professor Dunbar would give the talk, then he would say this much. So I'm extremely sorry that we could not make connection with him. So I'm trying to trying to tell as much as I know, but I am sorry that I am not so much expert as Professor Dunbar, but still I'm trying. So in the 1965, what social psychologist Stanley Milgram did, Stanley Milgram did one experiment in Nebraska, and he tried to find out that if two persons are there in the world in any different places, so how can one thing can reach to one person from other? That means how many intermediate persons are required for that person. Okay, so the idea of this experiment came from a paper in just not a paper, it was an essay by FRAI written in 1914. So when Karanthi wrote, this is a very interesting essay of 4-page length, and he wrote that that everyone in this world can be connected with maximum 6 people. Okay, suppose that means if I want to say that if you ask me whether I am familiar, I can send one say parcel to suppose Prince Charles, I can say yes, I will give it to one person, and it will give to another, and it will give to another, and that way it will reach. So that experiment was so much fruitful that it started the area of the social networking science, social networking, and in after some time, in near about 1979, so Gauhati started one example. Gauhati said that when we are thinking about the social networking, so people interested in weak tie. So what it means, imagine I have a tie. Okay, so imagine I have a tie. Tie means a friendship with someone else, correct? And he has some friendship connection. So, but we always try to focus on some points, that is some persons who has a strong connection, but in the same time we should connect with the person who has a weak connection, but he has a possibility to send the messages or send the information in the network. Just like imagine that there is an accident, okay, and I want to share that immediate news to my network, so that what I will do, I will share that information not to the person who has a large tie, but to the person who has a reliable tie, but it may be weak. So that was the paper which Gauhati did in research work. And if I come into the conclusion, even to come into the perspective of Dunbar's number, so Dunbar's number did not discuss anything about social small world phenomena. That is the experiment done by Stanley Milgram. But what recently Dunbar connected social networking phenomena with his Dunbar's number, and we found basically that that he showed 5, 15, 20. That 5 is nothing but the layer through which you can share the best communication. That means it is the very, very reliable layer. Okay, so if I want to share one information, so I cannot choose any random person who is in my friend, and I cannot share that message to him. So I need the trust. Okay, when there is a case of trust, there is case of good friendship, and to share the information into the network. So at the time, Dunbar's number plays crucial role. And about the 150 number, so I must say that even artificial intelligence has been started to work with develop various types of software with 150. And recently they found that when 150 is the Dunbar's number, that is 150 is gives us the stability. Similarly, that 150 gives us the stability in the various kind of administrative works. Recently in Denmark, it was found that when the taxpayers paid their taxes, so they try to pay their taxes into a group of 150, because the administration or the government of the Denmark made the rule that you have to collect the tax from the taxpayer into a group of 150. So that means it can be seen that Dunbar's number is everywhere, but the concept is, what is the mathematics of Dunbar's number from the new evolutionary neuroscience? That is the important questions, because as I already discussed earlier, even Professor Dunbar discussed that mathematical neuroscience connects the neurocortex volume and as well as as well as the brain size, as well as your cognition. So now the important question is the behavior of laziness. That means if a lazy person is given Facebook and WhatsApp, so according to his Dunbar's number, that is 150, so what he will use at first, whether it is Facebook or WhatsApp. So that is the important questions. And why these questions are important to the mathematicians, I must tell that right now all of you know that mathematics is nothing but the interdisciplinary sciences where graph theory, number theory, and other areas, topology, these are playing the crucial roles. So if we can analyze our social behavior with the mathematics, then I can tell that one day our society would be better, because you can check that in case of riot, so when there is a riot, so people try to form their groups. And what types of groups? Not random groups, it's a reliable groups. Even Dunbar's number has a implication in terrorist network. It was found that stability of the terrorist networks depends on the 150, and that was published in paper in proceedings of National Academy of Science, and it was discussed in even one of the mathematical conferences based on the terrorism in probably in France, if I'm not mistaken. So that is one of the reasons, so that we can think about Dunbar's number. So this is from my side, from my knowledge, which I'm sharing you. I'm extremely sorry that we were trying to connect, but due to the bad weather or due to the network issue, so we are unable to continue his talk. I'm extremely sorry, and I'm sure that all of you will forgive me, especially for this problem. And now I'm requesting just for a few minutes to Professor B.C. Kolita sir to say a few words and share his experience with us. Sir, please. Sir, probably sir is not there. So with this, I am requesting Professor Hemanta Kumar Sharma sir to deliver his vote of thanks. I'm requesting Professor Hemanta Kumar Sharma sir to deliver vote of thanks.
Santanu, Dunbar, Professor Dunbar is coming.
Hello?
Oh, okay. That's good. That's really good thing. Yeah. That's really good thing. That's really good thing. Professor Dunbar is just 1 minute.
My apologies to everybody. I didn't realize I'd lost the connection there at the end.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
You can please continue.
Who, me?
Yeah, you can continue, please.
I'm not sure where I got to in the talk. Where did it break off?
It break off in that is after the social brain hypothesis. If I'm not wrong, after social brain hypothesis, it was break after 2-3 slides.
Really?
Yes, sir. So you can start from there.
Sure, it's been down all that time.
Yeah, you can start from that slide also.
I do apologize. This is terrible.
Yeah. Network issue, Professor. Thank you.
I never received. Well, it's probably because I switched my email off to reduce the load on the system. I'm afraid. I do apologize. This is shocking. Let me try and get back to the screen.
Yes, you can continue, Professor. You can continue.
Do you see that? No, it'll come in a minute, maybe. Ah, yes, we have it. Okay. Wait a minute. Let me. Do you have the full screen now?
Let me check, Professor. Let me check.
Yeah, I saw something. Okay, I think you did.
Please share your screen, Professor.
Yep. You have it?
Please share your screen, Professor.
I have. It just takes a while. I think it takes a while to bring it up.
Okay, okay.
So do you have that?
Okay, now it's working.
Okay. Where do we want to go to? Do you have? Did you see this graph?
Yeah, sir. This one is the slide. Yeah.
Have you? So I'm going to go very quickly through them to try and find out where it cut out. Okay.
Okay. Okay, Professor.
You just tell me when you find a slide which you've not seen before.
Yeah. Why the time is important. So you should start from this one.
From this one. Okay. So
why the time is
do this very quickly then, because
okay.
I'm conscious that everybody has been sitting around a long time.
Okay, Professor.
Okay, so this is really trying to understand what's going on, how we build friendships. It's based on the model that works in primates. This is how primates build their friendships. It's a two-process model, and the important component of it is based on this activity here, social grooming, which I'm sure you will have seen monkeys do a lot of if you've ever watched monkeys. Now, what grooming does is trigger the release of endorphins in the brain. Endorphins are part of the pain control system, but they're opiates, so they give us a very slight sense of opiate high. We feel very relaxed, we feel very warm, very trusting of the people we do this with. And it's this that creates this sense of warmth and trust that we have in relationships. And we can show in humans, our collaborators in Finland have shown here in humans that stroking of the body triggers the release of endorphins in the brain. This is people's brains firing up, absorbing the endorphins that have been released from the endorphin-producing neurons in the brain by social stroking. And this is a consequence of a group of neurons called the afferent C-tactile or CT neurons, which were only discovered about 15 years ago. And they're very different to all the normal neurons we have in the peripheral parts of the body, which deal with things like pain. Pain and other sensory neurons are very fast. They have a return loop to the muscles to instruct the muscles to behave in a certain way. The CT neurons are very slow. They only go one way. There's no return loop, and they only respond to light, slow stroking at almost exactly 3 centimeters a second. So that's the speed with which hand movements occur in grooming, the speed with which the fur is being moved. It's the movement of the fur that triggers the receptors at the base of the hair follicles to activate the endorphin producing neurons in the center of the brain. The brain then absorbs them and we feel very warm and happy. And here's just a reminder of how delicate friendships are and how sensitive they are to the investment of time. It's one of our longitudinal studies where we followed some students through from just before they came to university. They went up to university here, and then this was their first year at university. And this is looking at the change in emotional closeness to various members of their social network, to their extended family. So this is the whole extended family, cousins, everybody in there. Doesn't really change very much, but because they're not seeing the original friends they had at school before they went to university, they're not seeing them much after this point. Their sense of closeness to them drops off very, very fast indeed. And within 2 or 3 years, these will no longer be friends in a kind of meaningful sense. So you really have to keep investing in friendships, because it's these activities that trigger the endorphin system that keep the friendships going. So just to give a sense of the quantity of time involved, this is data on grooming time in monkeys and apes. Each dot is one species. This is y-axis is the average amount of time spent grooming in different species plotted against group size. You can see it increases essentially linearly, but reaches an asymptotic value at about 20%. So these are species that devote about 1/5 of their day to social interaction. They tend to live in very big groups. We plug humans into the same graph and read off where they ought to be. This would mean with our groups of 150, if we bonded them the same way that monkeys and apes do with social grooming, we'd have to spend about 45% of our daytime engaged in grooming, and that's clearly impossible. And it turns out, in fact, that on average, most people devote about 20% of their day to social interaction with their friends and family. This is a wide set of data from Europe, Africa. There's some Nepalese hill farmers in here, some New Guinea horticulturists, and so on. So it's this big gap here that somehow we managed to use the same amount of time, but use it more efficiently to increase the size of our social network. And the way we think we do this is that we found various other activities which trigger the same endorphin system. So this is the predicted amount of grooming time that we would expect for different populations of our fossil ancestors. So these are fossil modern humans, our own species, Neanderthals, other archaic humans, Homo erectus in Asia, Homo gaster in Africa, and the Australopithecines, the very first members of our lineage after the split with the great apes. You can see they sit at this 20% of time devoted to grooming, the same as upper limit on primates. So it's, what have we done to break through that limit and allow us to spend more time with our friends, triggering the endorphin system? And we think that it's these activities here which came in 3 steps. Initially, laughter, because that's something we share with great apes, and it's very visceral. We can't help laughing when other people laugh. Then singing and dancing, singing without words here. And finally, when language evolved in the form we have it, which dates from about here, 200,000 years ago, the rituals of religion and storytelling, feasting, social eating, and so on. And just to give you, show you that this really does trigger the endorphin system, we're using a pain threshold change. So remember, the endorphins are part of the pain system. They're opiates, they give us this, they depress the feeling of pain. So if they're activated by some activity, then the pain threshold should increase. How much pain you can stand should increase after you've laughed. So we give people a pain threshold test, we measure their pain threshold, we get them to watch a video which makes them laugh or not, and then we retest their pain threshold. Here's 0, no change. If endorphins have been chucked out in the brain and absorbed in the brain, their pain threshold should be up here. If it hasn't, it'll be sort of either at 0 or below. We get them to watch a comedy video or some very dull video like golfing instruction video, which nobody laughs at, and then we measure their pain threshold. And you can see all the people who watched in these 5 studies we did, people who watched the comedy video and laughed, or had an increase in pain threshold indicating endorphins were activated, and people who watched neutral videos all had 0 or below 0 scores. And then we've done that, our collaborators in Finland have done that with imaging, neuroimaging, and we can see here the brain lighting up in response to absorbing endorphins after people have laughed while in the scanner, watching a comedy video here. And this raises the question really of how we allocate our time to the various layers, and how we do that. And this was a model developed. We have done it as an agent-based model because we thought it was too difficult to solve analytically. But some of my physicist collaborators in Spain developed what's essentially an EARN model, statistical EARN model, of how we allocate time. So think of the time as the balls you have to allocate to different EARNs, where the EARNs are the annually of the network, and there are costs and benefits of allocating time or effort to the different annually to the different EARNs. And this is their model. It's essentially a binomial probability model. but it has this important component here, the Lagrange multipliers in here, which give it its shape. And the shape that comes out of it is very nicely the exact shape of the structure of social networks. So this is your innermost circle of 1.5 friends, the 5 circle, the 15 circle, the 50 circle, the 150 circle. You can see this nice, this is the fraction of ties, fraction of links that you have. So this is the optimal distribution. A very small number of best friends, a lot of distant friends, if you like, in the 150 circle. But what it had puzzled us when we looked at the outputs of these models was that it appeared to reverse at some point and produce completely the opposite pattern, the mirror image almost, where you have instead of a concave shape, a convex shape with a lot of very close friends and very few distant friends. And we were puzzled about this until we realized that what made the difference was the size of the Lagrange multiplier. If it was above 0, you got the classic concave shape that we see in all our social networks and defines that Dunbar graph. But if it's below 0, you get the converse shape. And we went back and looked at the distribution of Lagrange multipliers, mu here, in a set of Spanish friendship networks, and these are them. So these are the number of individuals here who had different values of mu. The dotted line here is the mean for the data as a whole, and it's very close to this observed scaling ratio of 3 that we found. Here's the Lagrange multiplier here at 0 equal to 0. And here, sure enough, are some people who are in 0 territory. When we looked at the difference between these people who have mu greater than 0 compared to these people who have mu less than 0, what we find is this big difference. So if you have mu greater than 0, you have this nice classic convex shape, but these people with mu less than 0 have this inverse shape, which we hadn't realized existed, because we just treated these as kind of part of the error variance and hadn't bothered to worry about it. And this prompted us to ask what's causing this, and we thought it was probably the fact that these people didn't have much choice. Many people they could invite to be friends, as it were, and it was the constraint was the size of the community, that the pool of people you could have as friends. And it made us go away and look at immigrant communities, because we thought this is the problem essentially they have. When you first go as an immigrant to a community, you have a very small group of people that you understand and can talk to and so on, and understand how they think and what they mean when they say something. And so you tend to concentrate your social effort in these parts. We found 3 communities, immigrant communities in Spain. I think these are, one of them was the Sikh community, and I think this was them. But all 3 show the same pattern. When we looked at their Lagrange multipliers, they're all below, with a very few exceptions, they're all below 0. So they indeed then had these inverted links. Now, what this raised in my mind is the question of whether Granovetter was right. So Granovetter famously said the reason we have these extended networks, friendship networks with these weak social ties, weak links in the outer parts, is as an information gathering resource. We can find out where the best deals are at the supermarket, which are the exciting new music bands to see, which are the exciting new films to go and watch. So in trying to understand where the limits are, was Granovetter right that the best source of information are these outer layers? At the time, I did this some years ago, so it's quite a clunky, mathematically quite a clunky analysis. I had the idea of just trying to figure out what the probability of hearing about something, or indeed in current conditions of COVID, being infected by some disease, so it's an information diffusion model, if you like, as a function of your chances of meeting with somebody, talking to somebody in any of the given layers. So it's taking these probabilities of actual contact, from actual face-to-face contact from our data for the various layers, calculating these outwards, and in fact I took them out to 5,000, extrapolated the contact frequencies out. And this is the pattern you get. You can see that the chances of hearing about something or being infected with something increases dramatically as the size of your network increases. But it reaches an asymptotic value at about 150. So after that, there's very little gain. And we're interested really here in the point of inflection, the point at which the graph starts to curve over, because that marks the point where the benefits no longer are worth the cost. So you're paying a big cost but getting less and less benefit. And we can determine that by simply what's 1 ETH, 1 over E, down from the asymptotic value. And what that gives us, that's this line here, what that then gives us here, the point at which this line crosses the data graph, is the group size of 50. So there isn't really much point in having more than a network of more than 50 friends and family to find out information about stuff. Or conversely, they're the people most likely to infect you if it's some disease. So 50 really is the limit. If Granovetter was thinking about people beyond that, it looks like he was wrong. My physics collaborators in Italy had a go at this, looking at a rather more sophisticated go, looking at their Twitter data set, which is based on scraping 300,000 accounts. And this is the egocentric networks among the Twitter followers, as it were. And this is done by calculating reachability. So if you remove random nodes in the network graph, how does it affect reachability within the graph? And so it's essentially the opposite of the graph that I just showed you. But these are the results they got. You can see it's increasing exponentially as layer size increases. So the bigger the layer, the less likely your information channels will be to be affected. But if we take 1 over E again from the bottom asymptote this time, again, what it gives us is actually something very, very close to 50. The actual projected number is 52.5, so it couldn't really be closer. So it really does look as if Granovetter's weak links hypothesis really only applies to the inner core of our networks and not to the wider network as a whole. So just to sum up very quickly, the human social network is very small indeed, that's Dunbar's number. Its size is determined by our brain size. These networks are highly structured, and thanks to Dr. Acharjee now, they've been labeled Dunbar graphs. The structure of these graphs is determined mainly by time constraints. And the last bit of advice really is that friendships decay very quickly indeed. So if you don't invest in them, you will lose them. So by parting piece of advice, if you like, is don't forget your friends, keep your friendships going. And on that, I can stop and we can go back to hopefully the original screen. There we go.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Dunbar, for your innovative talk. Now, I would like to request my colleague, Dr. Debashish Bhattacharjee sir, to take a few questions from audiences, and he will ask you, Professor, some questions of the audiences. So I'm requesting Dr. Debashish Bhattacharjee sir to ask a few questions on behalf of the audiences. Debashish da, please. Debashish da. Debashish da, please.
Yeah.
Hello. Debashish da, please ask a few questions.
Can I ask some questions, Santanu? Hello, Santanu. Hi, Santanu. Can I raise some questions in this regard?
More screen for
Where is Devasis? I think he has left the meeting. Anyway, I think Professor Dunbar, thank you very much for giving a very nice presentation. Yeah, your topic also very much excellent and very interesting. Now, I'd like to raise one question, general question.
Yep.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
As soon as the research, as far as the research on the brain, the sound system. As far as the research on the brain of the great scientist Albert Einstein is concerned.
Hello.
And,
Hello, Professor Dunbar. Hello, Professor Dunbar.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, we have one question. So a participant asked a question, do Dunbar vary across the globe? A participant asked a question, do Dunbar's number vary across the globe?
Okay, let me answer that in a minute. Right now, Professor Doshar is in the middle of asking a question, so let's go ahead with his question first, shall we? Do you want to carry on, sir?
Yeah, Okay. Thank you, Professor. Please carry on.
Okay, I think now what I have learned, lot of research are going on the brain structure of Albert Einstein.
Yep.
And what are the significant outcome up till now? And do you also think that Einstein brain is different from the normal human brain?
I have to say, I think it probably is, because I think we have two choices, if you like, in this life. We can be very social, and then a lot of the space in our brain is taken up with social algorithms, or we can be less social, which costs us less brain space for social algorithms, and we have spare capacity then for doing interesting things like mathematics. My guess is, and I think this is probably widely recognized, is people who are very mathematical tend to be somewhat less social, famously. And that my suspicion is that's because whether by genetic background or by upbringing, your brain comes to be a bit more specialized in handling these abstract processes, and you know, mathematics is difficult. It's difficult stuff for ordinary people to understand, as I'm sure we all appreciate, and it requires enormous computing power on the part of the brain, but it's not the kind of computing power which we use in everyday life. You know, doing complex abstract mathematics is the kind that all you people do, and of course Einstein famously, perhaps more than anybody else, you know, it's very unusual kind of computation that the brain is doing, and it needs a lot of spare capacity in there. So I suspect there's a little bit of sense in which we can say Einstein's brain was very special, just as all your brains are very special because you can do mathematics.
Okay, thank you very much. But
Okay.
My next question is, as far as our social life is concerned, some person know how to make friendships very easily.
Yes.
And some other person do not know how to make friendship. He has to live a very lonely life.
Yes.
And whether there's a brain structure difference or some mental ideology is different, what is about your opinion in this regard?
Yes, we're very familiar with these effects in our data. Essentially, they come down to the difference between introverts and extroverts. And the difference between introverts and extroverts really seems to be one of two alternative but equally good strategies. One, the introverts tend to prefer to invest heavily in the quality of their friendships. So they prefer to have a few friends. Well, let's start with the first point is we all seem to have the same capital, social capital available. That's time and the emotionality of the relationship. So we can choose to invest that very heavily in a few people and have very good quality friendships. That's the strategy introverts adopt. And they're more towards having a Lagrange multiplier close to 0. And becoming on the edge of becoming an inverted social network. An extrovert, more like social butterflies, they prefer distribute their time and effort very thinly across many people, and as a result, they have bigger networks, but they have less emotionally close friendships, right? But the two work together very importantly in society, because what the extroverts do is provide the connections between little groups of introverts who'd otherwise end up being in kind of silos on their own. So the two, having extroverts around is very important for those of us who are introverts, if I can put it this way. There is another, I mean, there are lots of differences that explain why the range of variation is so great. The other big one is a sex difference, because women are generally much more social than men. They tend to have bigger bits of the brain that are involved in managing social relationships. So these areas at the front of the brain tend to be a bit bigger in women. Just to defend male honor here, the difference is not enormous, of course, but it's very consistent and very significant. So there are many personality effects that make these contributions. So perhaps I should go back to the question.
Thank you.
Santanu,
Thank you, sir. Sir, one question. Professor Madhurjo P. Bora sir of Department of Physics, Gauhati University asks an interesting question. How does the Dunbar number affect the epidemiology like current coronavirus pandemic?
Well, you asked previously another one, right? That was this the Dunbar number also true in other cultures? So let me just quickly answer that. The answer is yes. Yeah, okay. We see no evidence at all that it's not different in other cultures. The big problem becomes in how you define friend in the end. And if you like, this is the message from the Facebook data, is because Facebook treats everybody as a friend, it can include many thousands. You can sign up many thousands. But if you look at the patterns of interaction, then you see that actually people only have about 150 true friends. So if you look at even people who have 1,000 friends on Facebook, most of those 1,000 friends are never spoken to. They're kind of, voyeurs into your social life. They're not meaningful friends. And again, we can, if you look at, although nobody's looked at social networks, they have looked at social networks in Philippine hunter-gatherers, hunter-gatherers in the Philippines, and we find exactly the same layers there as we find in our own social networks of 5, 15, 50 layers. But certainly all the data on hunter-gatherer group sizes, community sizes, yields the same numbers, 150 with the same layers of 5 and 15 and 50 and so on. So we haven't. And also we see it through time, it hasn't changed in Europe over 1,000 years, the size of traditional villages. So, culture changes faster than that. The English is spoken now could not be understood by the people who spoke English in Britain 1,000 years ago, yet our village sizes haven't changed. So that's the answer. Now, how does this relate to COVID? I think the answer is it's about the risk of, well, there's two sides of it. One is the risk of infection, and the data, the last analysis I showed you, it rather predict that, or suggest that the most likely people to infect you are actually the people you see most often, who are in fact your friends and family, although if you're, especially if you're in lockdown, obviously if you were at work, you would see many people perhaps during the course of the day at work who might infect you, but the people you spend most time with and the people therefore who are most likely to infect you are your friends and family. But also there's a lesson here perhaps for lockdown itself, that lockdown is going to weaken friendships because we're not seeing people, and you know, if you have many friends and few family because you come from a small family, you may find your friendships weakened, and you have to kind of start rebuilding them again when we come out of lockdown because of this decay effect. If your social network is mainly family because you come from a big extended family, as of course will often be true in India perhaps, then this will have less effect because family creates a robusticity in the network because it's interconnected. It's all very highly interconnected. So I think those are the lessons for friendships. And I think we also predicted that at the end of lockdown, people would make a big effort to meet up again with the people important to themselves, including family and friends, visit and meet up. And this is exactly what's happening here in the UK right now.
Professor, I want to take one last question from the audience. The question was that how Dunbar's number can be related with the fractal number, that is the fractal you talked about.
Yeah, this is a good question. At the end of the day, what we think is happening, and this was based on our understanding of how primate groups are put together, is that if you look at the structure of the network, it really consists of a large number of small groups of 5 or 15 maybe bolted together, right? So your group of 50 kind of good friends, if you like, consists of 3 sets of people's best friends, that's 15 layers, which are linked together either through some extrovert member of one of these groups or just through some relationship or friendship or family. And that's what creates this fractal structure to it. That's exactly how primate groups are fitted together. If you look at the distribution of primate groups, they as a whole, the average group sizes for all the species of primates, they have a fractal structure with the same scaling ratio of 3, and indeed the big species have this same fractal structure that our social networks have, again with a scaling ratio of 3. So they're embedded in these same kind of layers. And then very recently, only last month, some American physicists I had an accidental collaboration with have developed a model which looks at the criticality points in networks, at the points at which they become self-organized. And they showed that this number 150 happens to be a criticality point, right? Either side of that, the network structure becomes less well integrated in terms of information flow. So they were just using a standard kind of information diffusion model to look at this. And what they've since shown is that actually there are, so they were only interested in Dunbar's number at that point. And I said, well, actually, it would be really interesting to know about the layers because these are fractally related and they're the sizes of groups we see in other species of monkeys and apes. So they have a graduate student looking at that. And I believe he has now found that actually these other layer sizes are also criticality points. It's just that they're kind of lower criticality points. There's a trade-off here between what cost is worth paying to have a bigger group and the criticality effect that makes certain kinds of group values attractors in this distribution. And these attractors turn out to occur at 5, 15, 50, and 150. And we know that's exactly what happens in the distribution of primate group sizes. 5s, 15s, 50, and us only 150 turn out to be uniquely common group sizes. You don't often get group sizes away from that. We have some data on that actually in looking at fission rates. So what normally happens to group sizing, these groups are never stable in their size. They increase because you acquire new friends, or because of births, naturally increasing group size in natural groups. And we looked at the fission processes that regulate group size, that keep it near the attractor in Hutterites in America, who are a small religious community that have been there for 100 years, but they try and keep their communities, they're farmers, they try and keep their community size at 150. And what we found was that if you plot the delay to the next fission as a result of the size at foundation, so at the previous fission, then the community lasted much longer if it had a group size of 50 or 150. If it was in between, say 100, it seemed to have to undergo fission sooner than would otherwise be necessary, right? So this again, it looks like this 50 and 150 somehow are attractors for social stability in complex networks. They really are criticality points in the sense of the physicists use that, statistical physicists use that term. So they're phase transition points at which the system locks into a very stable state. But if you push the system beyond that because of births or immigrations or what have you, then it pushes it into past the criticality point, and the system is less efficient. So there's something about the efficiency of information flow at these critical values. There's a long answer, I'm afraid.
Yeah, Professor, one last question from one participant. So the question was quite interesting. What is the future prospect of Dunbar's number?
I'm sorry to say we're stuck with it forever. The only way to increase it is to increase the size of your brain.
So,
right? And I'm afraid the ladies
on behalf of
will not have big brain babies.
So,
Professor Dunbar, you are most welcome to visit Gauhati University.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very kind of you. One day I hope to come here.
Okay.
Yes. So, with this much of questions, I want to thank Professor Dunbar for giving his informative, innovative, and very inspiring talk with full of knowledge about the human psychology, evolutionary neuroscience, and all these things. Now, there are many questions, but due to the time limit, we could not take all the questions. So I'm sorry for it, but we hope that in future we'll have scope to listen more talks from Professor Dunbar. Now I'm requesting Professor Hemanta Kumar Sharma sir, Professor Department of Mathematics, to deliver his vote of thanks.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I have been asked to offer a vote of thanks on behalf of the Department of Mathematics of Gauhati University. So in the beginning, I would like to offer our sincere thanks to Professor Dunbar of Oxford University for accepting our invitation and delivering today's talk. This was probably one of the rare kind of lectures held under the banner of the Department of Mathematics of Gauhati University, where an eminent psychologist was delivering lecture on scope of mathematics in neurosciences. His talk further underlines the need of interdisciplinary research for future growth and development of human civilization. We'll be looking forward for guidance and collaborative work of Professor Dunbar in future, which he already started almost a year back through his collaborative work with one of our young faculty members, Dr. Santanu Acharjee, who happens to be the coordinator of today's program. Their collaboration has already produced some research papers. I hope their collaborative work will help us to introduce some papers at M.Sc level, which are of interdisciplinary nature in future in our department. To offer our sincere thanks to Professor P.J. Hendrick, sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Gauhati University, for giving the inaugural lecture. Next, I would like to offer our sincere thanks to Professor Rudrakanta Deka, Head of the Department of Mathematics of Gauhati University, for giving a brief introduction about the department. As per information of the coordinator of today's program, Dr. Santanu Acharjee, around 1,060 persons registered for this webinar from different streams. Some of them are faculty members of different departments of colleges and universities. Some are doctors, engineers, even advocates and people from corporate world. So that is very interesting. Moreover, participants are from different parts of the globe, making the webinar a one in the true sense of the term. We offer our sincere thanks to each and every participant for making the webinar a successful one. We also offer our sincere thanks to all members of the Gauhati University family and other institutes and organizations who help us directly or indirectly in making this webinar a successful one. In particular, I would like to offer our sincere thanks to Dr. Aziz Khan, a freelance software developer of Gauhati, for his technical support to the organizers of today's program. With these words, I conclude the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your vote of thanks. Now, before I'm requesting our head of the department, sir, Professor Rudrakanta Deka, sir, to formally declare the end of this program. I want to make one announcement. The feedback link, was already shared in the chat box as well as in description box of the YouTube. So please go to the link and share your feedback with us. So it will helpful for us to generate the certificate as well, and for your also it will help us to know your feedback. Thank you for being with us with so much of patience. Now I would like to request our head of the department, sir, Professor Rudrakanta Deka, sir, to declare the end of the program. Sir, please. Sir, please. I'm requesting Professor Rudrakumar Deka, sir, to declare end of this program. Sir, please. So, yeah, sir is online.
Good afternoon again. So I'm very happy that our program ended successfully, and I'm thankful to all of you, and I declare this program to end.
Thank you very much.